October 1780. A whisper spreads across the backcountry. A British officer named Patrick Ferguson is on the move. He's ruthless. He's precise. He's got a breech-loading rifle and a warning for anyone living beyond the Appalachians. Resist and your homes, families, and lives will pay the price. But the settlers didn't flinch. They were hunters, woodsmen, men and women who lived on the edge of civilization. They didn't care about politics until Ferguson's threat became personal. In response, nearly 900 Overmountain men saddled their horses, carrying rifles, grit, and vengeance. They were about to ride 330 miles across rivers and mountains to hunt one man. So how did these 900 frontiersmen track down Ferguson and bring him to justice? It was late 1780, and the backcountry of Virginia, North Carolina, and Tennessee was buzzing with tension. Homes were being raided, families were being threatened, and word spread that Major Patrick Ferguson, a notorious Loyalist officer, was marching to crush the frontier settlers. The response? A ragtag army of frontiersmen, farmers, and hunters started gathering. These weren't professional soldiers. These were men who knew how to live off the land, track game, and fight in the woods. But now they were being asked to do something extraordinary. Ride over 330 miles through rough terrain to stop one man. From the start, it was clear this was no ordinary march. Men from Tennessee, North Carolina, and Virginia were converging, led by names like Isaac Shelby, John Sevier, and William Campbell. Each man brought his rifle, his determination, and in many cases, a personal vendetta against Ferguson. Young boys, 16 and 17, marched alongside seasoned hunters in a display of raw courage. Imagine grinding through rain, mud, swollen streams, and mountains, some with little more than a flintlock and a bag of powder. Hunger and fatigue were constant companions, yet morale was high because they had to stop Ferguson before he reached the heart of the backcountry. Every mile they traveled deepened their resolve. It was a march fueled not by glory but survival, and by the time they were near the South Carolina border, they were no longer just farmers. They were a force capable of toppling one of Britain's most feared Loyalist officers. Next, let's watch how these men transformed intelligence and cunning into a precise hunt for Ferguson. The Overmountain Men weren't just riding blindly, they turned detective. Along the way, they relied on intelligence from locals and sometimes from forced guides. When they reached Solomon Beeson's house, they learned Ferguson was only 8 miles ahead at Kings Mountain. 2 captured Tories were presented with a choice: lead the Patriots to Ferguson or hang. Not surprisingly, they switched sides, showing just how fluid loyalties were in this war. The scouts kept uncovering more clues. A young woman pointed out a ridge where Ferguson's camp sits. Hunters and local militia recognized the terrain instantly. It's the same ridge they had hunted on months before. Even a 14-year-old boy, John Ponder, unknowingly delivered crucial intel. He carried Ferguson's dispatches to Cornwallis and confirmed Ferguson's distinctive checkered shirt. Frederick Hambright, a German-born militia officer, even told his men, "When you see Dot Man with a pig shirt, mark him with your rifles." By the time they reached the staging point, the rebels were disciplined but tense. 2 columns snaking through rain-soaked ravines and across Kings Creek. Horses were tied, guards posted, and the men advanced on foot. Every movement was calculated. They knew Ferguson was cunning, his forces trained, but the Overmountain Men had something the Loyalists didn't: intimate knowledge of the wilderness and an unshakable determination to stop him. The time had come. With all the intelligence in hand and positions chosen, the next step was to surround Ferguson's men and climb the ridge to meet them head-on. Once the scouts confirmed Ferguson's location, the Overmountain Men moved with precision. The rebel force split into divisions, each assigned a sector to surround the ridge. Campbell's Virginians took the south, Shelby's men the north, and Cleveland's command snaked along the northeast. It was like a giant living noose tightening around Ferguson's camp. The terrain worked in the rebels' favor. Steep slopes, rocky knobs, and thick trees provided natural cover. Colonels and captains coordinated silently because they knew that every second mattered. Scouts had revealed the placement of Ferguson's pickets, and the rebels used this to their advantage. They probed the terrain, positioning men so the Loyalists couldn't escape without running into rifle fire. Officers carried out last-minute checks, reminding men to prime their weapons and steel themselves. Victory was the only option. 16-year-old James Collins recorded the tension. Life, liberty, property, even the safety of wives and children seemed to hinge on the next move. The Overmountain Men advanced stealthily, crawling along ravines and branches to avoid detection. Horses were left tied below, and only officers remained mounted for a quick command relay. By late afternoon, the rebels had surrounded Ferguson's camp on multiple sides. The Loyalists were high on the ridge, confident in their defensive advantage, but oblivious to how tight the trap had become. With the rebel lines perfectly positioned and the Loyalists unaware of the full encirclement, it was only a matter of time before the first shot rang out and chaos erupted on Kings Mountain. The silence shattered when the first shots rang out on the ridge. The attack wasn't ceremonial. This was brutal, chaotic warfare, where each man fought for his life. Campbell's Virginians launched from the south, while Shelby's men struck from the north. The Loyalists, led by Ferguson and about 70 American volunteers, charged with fixed bayonets. It was a deadly dance, men rushing uphill, rifles cracking, bayonets glinting in the sun, and smoke curling through the trees. The Loyalist line, trained and disciplined, struck back with ferocity. Captain Alexander Chesney recalled riding along the ridge, trying to coordinate his men, only to be wounded as chaos unfolded around him. Time and again, the Loyalists surged forward, driving back the rebels, only to be met by a second and third wave of determined mountain men. Each charge brought bloodshed. Each retreat cost lives. From the trees and rocks, patriots fired with deadly accuracy. The Loyalists' elevation advantage was a trap in itself. Shots from above often overshot, while rifles from below found their marks with terrifying efficiency. 16-year-old James Collins and other young fighters moved from tree to tree, feeling the bullets whiz past and witnessing the horrifying losses around them. By now, the forest erupted with yells, the wilderness war cry echoing across the ridge, striking fear into Ferguson's men. The first clash had begun as a test of nerves, but it quickly turned into a grueling, bloody struggle where strategy, terrain, and raw courage were about to determine who would control the mountain. The fighting on Kings Mountain was unlike anything the Overmountain Men had faced before. After the initial Loyalist charges forced some retreat, the rebels didn't falter. They regrouped, reloaded, and advanced again. The slope was steep, the ground soaked from morning rains, and boulders and trees made every step a battle in itself. Yet the Patriots pressed upward, determined to surround Ferguson and his men. From the northern toe to the southern heel, the rebel divisions, Shelby, Sevier, Campbell, Cleveland, moved like a coordinated, if chaotic, wave. Each man was effectively his own command, advancing with rifles loaded and hearts pounding. 16-year-old Robert Henry recounted seeing officers fall only feet away, their hats floating in the air after rifle shots tore through the ranks. Yet the rebels adapted quickly, taking cover behind trees, rocks, and ravines, turning the forest itself into a shield. The Loyalists were fierce, repeatedly charging the advancing Patriots with bayonets and desperate energy. Captain Chesney described these charges as ferocious, forcing the mountain men to pause, but not long. Each assault by Ferguson's men left them increasingly exposed, and the rebels' rifle fire inflicted mounting casualties. Young fighters like Collins witnessed the grim scene firsthand, as men fell in heaps, yet the drive to reach the summit never wavered. Every advance brought them closer to Ferguson, and every volley and charge wore down the Loyalist defenders. The Overmountain Men weren't just climbing a ridge, they were methodically taking control of the mountain. As the Overmountain Men crept closer to the summit, the tension exploded into chaos. Suddenly, a piercing, blood-curdling yell echoed through the forest, their infamous Indian war cry that struck terror into the Loyalists. Ferguson's men had seen similar scenes at Musgrove Mill, but this was different. The wilderness itself seemed to roar as Patriots charged from every direction, rifles blazing and hatchets ready. Captain Abraham de Peyster, Ferguson's second-in-command, knew the day was slipping away as the rebels' intensity left no room for traditional battlefield formations. Ferguson, determined to rally his troops, rode along the ridge on his white horse, whistle clutched between his teeth. Despite losing the use of his right arm, he managed to coordinate repeated charges against Campbell, Shelby, and Cleveland's divisions. The Loyalist redcoats, roughly 70 strong, mounted ferocious bayonet attacks, forcing the rebels to retreat only to return moments later. Every time the Loyalists surged, they lost more men. Every rebel counterattack gained them critical ground. Eyewitnesses like James Collins described the escalating carnage. Every shot seemed to find its mark, and the enemy overshot nothing but themselves. Loyalist officers tried to rally their men, but the Overmountain Men's relentless assault and cover advantage made it nearly impossible. Ferguson's leadership kept the fight alive, but even his skill could not hold back the tide. The shrill whistle, the yells, the relentless fire, it was all converging toward a moment that was about to decide the battle. The Loyalists clung to the ridge, but the mountain was slipping from under Ferguson's control. And then, the battle raged as the Overmountain Men pressed their assault. Campbell's Virginians on the southern heel, Shelby's men on the northern ridge, and Cleveland's on the northeast all coordinated an irregular, relentless attack. There was no set formation. Each man acted as if he led his own command, a terrifying improvisation that worked to perfection against Ferguson's disciplined Loyalists. From tree to tree, boulder to boulder, the Patriots advanced, firing from cover, their rifles finding marks with deadly precision. The Loyalists, elevated on the ridge, initially enjoyed the high ground, but their musket fire proved disastrous. They overshot, leaving themselves exposed to deadly rifle shots from below. Ferguson's repeated bayonet charges forced temporary retreats, but each time, the rebels regrouped, surged back, and gained more ground. Captain Chesney, one of Ferguson's officers, recalled being wounded yet still forced to continue leading charges, while 16-year-old Robert Henry found himself in hand-to-hand encounters, bayonet clashing with rifle, blood mixing with mud. The chaos was almost cinematic, men falling, rifles discharging at point-blank range, officers shot while trying to rally the troops. Despite Ferguson's unyielding command, the Overmountain Men slowly closed in, encircling the Loyalists. James Collins described the third assault up the summit. Their leader, Ferguson, came in full view, within rifle shot, as if to encourage his men. He soon disappeared. By now, the Loyalists were hemmed in, facing the full fury of a militia motivated by vengeance, patriotism, and survival. With the summit nearly taken, Ferguson's carefully orchestrated defenses began to crumble, signaling that the climactic moment of the battle was just around the corner. As the rebels pressed their final push up the ridge, Ferguson's position became desperate. He tried to rally his men from the front, his red uniform partially hidden under a checkered hunting shirt. Even as rifle fire tore through his ranks, the shrill whistle he used to command the Loyalists persisted, cutting through the chaos like a clarion call. But with every charge repelled by the Overmountain Men, the Loyalists' cohesion weakened. Every retreat brought them closer to the brink, their numbers dwindling, their morale collapsing. Ferguson's attempts to use repeated bayonet charges against Campbell's, Shelby's, and Cleveland's divisions were heroic yet futile. Accounts describe men falling by dozens as they tried to meet the rebels at the toe of the ridge. Seized by the raw, unrelenting fire of the Patriots, the Loyalists could not maintain their formations. Even officers were targeted first. Captain Chesney recorded that his horse was killed beneath him. The intensity of the fighting left no room for mercy or pause. Young fighters, some just 16, loaded and fired rifles from behind trees, firing directly at the exposed Loyalists with deadly accuracy. Finally, the rebels reached the crest. Hemmed in on all sides and suffering catastrophic losses, the Loyalists' resistance crumbled. A cascade of rifle shots tore through him, leaving him lifeless as his white horse dragged him a short distance. 7 balls had pierced his body, his arms shattered. The mountain summit, once his stronghold, was now entirely in the hands of the Patriots. With Ferguson dead and the Loyalists decimated, the battle shifted from fierce struggle to grim aftermath, where the cost of victory would soon become painfully clear. The roar of guns faded, leaving behind an eerie silence punctuated by groans of the wounded. The battlefield at Kings Mountain was a scene of staggering carnage. One teenage patriot, James Collins, later recalled the horror. The dead lay in heaps, while the wounded begged for water that was often denied. In total, the Loyalists suffered 157 dead and 163 wounded too badly to move. On the rebel side, 28 men were killed, including Colonel James Williams, a man remembered for his courage, while 62 others were wounded. Officers faced disproportionate danger, often targeted by sharpshooters who aimed high, making the loss of leadership painfully visible in the ranks. Amid the chaos, rebels stripped the fallen Loyalists of swords, horses, fine clothing, and ammunition, dividing spoils among themselves. Survival, not mercy, ruled the mountain. The wounded Loyalists who could not march were left behind, exposed to the elements and predators. Collins recounted that wolves and hogs scavenged the battlefield, while human suffering continued as some rebels, driven by hatred and past grievances, executed vengeful acts on incapacitated foes. Even experienced leaders like Colonel Cleveland engaged in brutal enforcement, beating a surgeon for aiding a loyalist. The aftermath showcased both the heroism and savagery of frontier warfare. The sheer intensity and immediacy of combat left no room for mercy. The mountain's raw wilderness mirrored the violence of the men who fought there. With the fields strewn with dead and the wounded barely surviving, attention turned to the prisoners. What would the Patriots do with hundreds of captured loyalists? After the smoke cleared, the Patriots faced the daunting task of managing nearly 700 captured loyalists. Hunger, exhaustion, and wounds made every step a struggle. The march back to Gilberttown was brutal. Prisoners were herded between double lines of mounted Americans, some carrying 2 muskets, stripped of shoes, silver buckles, and provisions. Captain Chesney described the first night spent on the battlefield itself, amidst the groans of the dying and the stench of the dead. When morning came, the prisoners were forced to march without food, sustaining themselves on raw corn and pumpkins, fed only after reaching Fondren's plantation, where campfires roasted sweet potatoes to sustain the rebel army. The march revealed the personal grudges embedded in frontier warfare. Some rebels took out their anger on old neighbors or family members, leaving the wounded behind to die or executing those who couldn't keep pace. Colonel Brandon reportedly hacked a hiding loyalist to death, while Colonel Cleveland beat a surgeon aiding a Tory. The violence prompted Colonel Campbell to issue a formal order on October 11th, instructing officers to restrain disorderly treatment of prisoners, a rare appeal to discipline amid the chaos. Eventually, at Gilberttown, the rebels held a mock trial. 36 loyalists were sentenced to death, 9 hanged at night beneath the massive gallows oak, as a warning to all who would take up arms for the crown. The rest were marched 120 miles to Salem under harsh conditions, their morale broken. With the prisoners dealt with, the effects of Kings Mountain rippled far beyond the battlefield, shaping both Patriot morale and the British strategy in the South. The aftermath of Kings Mountain was a scene of staggering human cost. On the battlefield, 157 Loyalists lay dead, with another 163 too badly wounded to be moved, many perishing overnight. Rebel losses, though smaller, were significant. 28 Patriots were killed, including Colonel James Williams, who had led his men with extraordinary courage, and 62 were wounded, some dying later from their injuries. The young James Collins wrote of the horror around him. The dead lay in heaps. Groans of the wounded were heard in every direction. Thomas Young, 16 at the time, described the unbearable stench of battlefield carnage. Private David Witherspoon echoed the sentiment, recalling the constant cries for water from the suffering Tories. The victorious rebels did claim spoils, swords, horses, rifles, and fine clothing. But even that came at a psychological cost. The war on the frontier was personal, bitter, and brutal. Friend fought neighbor, and in many cases, family. The mistreatment of prisoners during the forced march to Salem, the executions of 9 Loyalists at the Gallows Oak, and the plundering of the defeated highlighted the raw and often lawless nature of frontier warfare. The rebels themselves were not untouched by the horrors. The trauma of witnessing such carnage was etched in their memories, shaping their understanding of war and revenge. Despite the brutality, Kings Mountain had a profound impact. Patriot morale surged, recruitment increased, and the victory sent shockwaves through Loyalist ranks. Cornwallis's left flank in the South was shattered, and the British campaign in North Carolina stalled, marking the start of a turning tide in the Southern theater. With the battlefield cleared and the British shaken, the stage was set for the strategic shifts that would follow across the Carolinas. Kings Mountain didn't just crush Ferguson's force, it reshaped the Southern campaign. Patriot morale soared while Loyalist enthusiasm collapsed. Recruitment for Cornwallis' army hit rock bottom. With 698 prisoners captured and Ferguson dead, Cornwallis lost his left flank and his plans for North Carolina stalled. In the months that followed, American leaders like Daniel Morgan and Nathaniel Greene leveraged this momentum, culminating in decisive victories at Cowpens and Guilford Courthouse. Even Tarleton's pursuit of Greene failed. The battle showed the power of frontier militias, ordinary men riding hundreds of miles, using knowledge of the terrain, and striking a well-defended enemy with deadly precision. In the end, Kings Mountain became the spark that ignited the Southern resistance and set the stage for British defeat in the war. So, what would you have done if you were riding 330 miles to face a feared enemy? Could you survive the relentless attacks and chaos on the ridge? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Give this video a like, subscribe for more history, and thanks for watching.